Mediation Board, and privileged to be very briefly your Master of Ceremonies for this morning's proceedings. I hope that you had a wonderful day yesterday. I'm gathered that the responses have been very positive, and if you had the opportunity to attend not only the workshops in the afternoon but to dip into the schools debate, I think you would find that certainly the future of this country is in excellent hands, and you know, the youngsters really did us proud. So I think we want to acknowledge that. We have the finals of the debate actually coming up tomorrow, and for those of you, as well as a couple of semi-final rounds, so that for those of you who are able to attend that, at least for some of the time, I think you'll find it very rewarding. Before I move on further, I just want to acknowledge in our midst that we have a number of delegates from various locations, and I don't know if any of them or some of them are here, but I know we have visitors from Grenada, so I don't know if you'd like to stand, those of you who are here, if any, and we can acknowledge them. I know we have at least one delegate, if not more, from Barbados also, so perhaps Perry, thank you. And of course from our colleagues in Jamaica, it's John Bassey. Okay. And I don't know if I've left out any of the other islands, but if you are here, certainly we'd welcome you and ask you to stand if you are. Sorry. Thank you. And of course, from further afield, Canada. So, and I don't know if we have anybody here from the US. And of course, locally, but even further afield, the Honorable Chief Justice of Rwanda, I know, who gave a wonderful presentation yesterday. So we also, once again, welcome him. And as far as our local contingent is concerned, whether we cover the north, south, east, or west, welcome once again. And of course, Tobago. And it is indeed my pleasure to welcome our distinguished panel of speakers this morning. Before I do that, though, I just want to mention that we have a very elaborate sessions organized for you after the initial addresses, starting with after the coffee break, and the chair of the Mediation Board, Justice Kokoram, will introduce those speakers. But in the afternoon session after lunch, which is at 12 o'clock today as opposed to yesterday at 1, we have various sessions, as you may see, dealing with insurance and personal injury claims, panchayat session for certified mediators, restorative justice, of course another session dealing with attorneys, and then later on this afternoon we also have sessions on standards and quality control, judicial settlement conferencing, project meeting, and of course a film. I should just mention that there's a slight correction in that the film to be shown in the Jade Room, As We Forgive, is ultimately, it's actually about reconciliation and not peer mediation as suggested. And then we have our final session this afternoon dealing with culture and language, which, as you know, is absolutely critical to how we craft the future of mediation in this country, and then finally a wrap-up session. So without further ado, I'd like to formally welcome the Honourable Minister of Legal Affairs, who's just joining us, Mr. Prakash Ramadar, and to acknowledge him, as well as the other distinguished delegates, judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the Industrial Court, and of course all certified mediators and trainers. Thank you for being here and for making this, I hope, a wonderful event. Our first speaker this morning is someone who I believe, I hope you wouldn't mind me saying, has really been a very distinguished attorney and now senior counsel, has perhaps later, in more recent times, embraced mediation as indeed a way forward. And of course, coming from a very distinguished practitioner of the law, I think that speaks volumes. If I were to read out his resume, we would be here for some time, but I just want to elaborate certain of the various portfolios that he's held over the years. Mr. Srinath Jairam, who's a senior counsel and president of the Law Association, was admitted to the bar in 1977. He was elevated to the rank of senior counsel in October 1998 and is currently the elected president of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, a position he's held since July 2012. He was also formerly a commissioner of the Law Reform Commission and on the Police Service Commission, as well as within the medical sector on the Medical Board and a Private Hospitals Board. And he also served in the sporting field as Vice Chairman of the Racing Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, Director of the Public Transport Service Corporation, and of course formerly a Judge of the High Court, but someone in his many and varied practice has practiced in virtually all of the islands, including St. Vincent, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, in Guyana, as well as Grenada, and of course at the Privy Council. And most notably, I think of all of this, he was also the very first graduate from the Hewarding Law School to take Silk. So it is indeed my very great pleasure to welcome to the podium Mr. Sina Jairam, Senior Counsel.
So mediation time. We got to change our minds. Mediation is the way. Listen what I say.
The Honorable Mr. Prakash Ramadar, Member of Parliament and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Chief Justice of Rwanda, Honorable Judges, distinguished participants, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I recognize as well my friend Dean Barry. Welcome. It is a pleasure to be here at this Mediation Symposium. As President of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, I bring you greetings and the best wishes. Many thanks to Justice Kokaram for the invitation and for the introduction by Judge David Gafoor, Chairman of the Tax Appeal Board. I think what I'm about to say you have all learned some time ago, and at least by yesterday, and you will learn much more today. I made a few notes and I was minded to talk ad lib, but I said to myself, with such a distinguished gathering, maybe I will go astray. So I will stick to the scripts and sometimes I'll deviate. As we all know and appreciate, mediation is a valuable and effective tool for conflict prevention and the peaceful settlement of disputes. It can support peaceful transitions and nurture reconciliation, something which in my 37 years at the bar, litigation cannot and does not do. There is always a winner in litigation, and there is always a loser. In mediation, it is a win-win situation because the solution lies, or solutions lie in the parties' hands. Mediation is already used successfully by thousands of people every year, and the frequency of people reaching agreements using mediation is continuing to increase. Mediation does not destroy relationships like litigation, but rather tends to mend broken relationships. As the great Mahatma Gandhi once said, if you invoke the biblical law in litigation, an eye for an eye, then half the population would be blind. We do not need that. Many people still see the justice system as inaccessible and intimidating. The cost of mediation is considerably less than litigation. And you could ask anyone who has had the fortune or misfortune to retain senior counsel. Mediations are strictly confidential and afford parties an opportunity to voice opinions that would not otherwise be expressed in open court. The solution to the problems, as I said earlier, lie in the parties' hands in mediation. We all therefore need to promote and support mediation and encourage people to use alternatives to court to resolve their disputes. People should see this as the starting point. Mediation offers parties the ability to have control over finding a resolution to the issues that is more amenable than one that would be found in a court of law and imposed by a court of law. Today, we have before us and amongst us a group of seasoned and skilled practitioners as mediators. And for that, I welcome them to Trinidad and Tobago, and I thank them for their services and giving of their time and expertise so selflessly. I'm confident that today will afford you an opportunity to share analyses and build contacts. I wish you all an enjoyable experience at this symposium, which represents an excellent platform for debate and for developing new ideas. I hope it will foster new ideas, initiatives, and projects to enhance the practice of this important field. Now, before I leave, I think I should share with you maybe 3 examples. And we have a judge here who was involved in a matter in judicial settlement conference. The parties were related, and they had intractable positions. They were trenchant in their disputations, and they were poles apart. And we told the judge to whom the case was assigned that we would like a shot at mediation or judicial settlement. Maybe I should name him because he did a wonderful job, Mr. Justice Devines. He rolled up his sleeves and he got the parties. He said, attorneys, Mr. Attorneys, I don't wish to hear from you all, except if it is necessary. Let me hear from the parties. And you know, he did such a wonderful job. He got the warring families on speaking terms. And when they arrived at the settlement, I saw them hugging one another, and tears flew endlessly. To me, that is the essence of mediation. Now, you would never see that in the court of law, because when you appear before a judge, somebody wins and somebody loses. So somebody is sour, somebody is very happy. Mediation heals and brings back the parties together. I had another case, and I should share it with you. One of our most distinguished citizens was sued, and I think he received the highest honor of Trinidad and Tobago. The judge had the perspicacity to say, we want the third party, which was the institution I represented, to be served with these papers because that institution should be represented. The litigation had been proceeding merrily along as litigation. 2 sides had senior counsel. Neither was talking to each other. But when I got involved, I said, gentlemen, why don't we go to mediation? They were happy. They wanted it from someone who they thought was neutral, and maybe I represented that voice of neutrality. We went to mediation, and we were able to hammer out in 2 sessions a complete settlement, and all 3 parties came out smiling and winning. To the extent, when we had to go back before the judge in the High Court, the gentleman who was sued and whom I did not represent, we were trying to record the order. And when I came out, he came to me and he shook my hand and he says, thank you very much, Mr. Jairam. Now, I have never seen a defendant complimenting, and he hugged me. And to me, that was the pinnacle of my career. I mean, I've won many big cases for clients and they were exuberant, but this was a defendant and he was so pleased. The last example I'd like to share with you was a very difficult case. A man who was a CEO of a company was recruited from abroad and was fired in circumstances that traumatized him and his family. I stood by him because it was a personal relationship. His godson and my daughter went to medical school together, and I got to know the godson very well, and he asked me to represent his godfather. And eventually, senior counsel on the other side, we went to mediation. And when my learned friend, he started to talk about legal principles. And I said to him by name, I wouldn't name his name now, I said, listen, we're not here to discuss legal principles because we will argue until the cows come home and neither of us will agree or may agree. Let the parties talk. It's a healing process. Let my client speak and let your client representative speak, and let us see where we go from there. So they started to talk, and my client was very emotional. And we had a breakout session. And when we went to the separate room, he said, you know, Mr. Jairam, the lady who is representing, there were several representatives, but the chief spokesperson, he said, I trust her, and I know she would not misrepresent anything to me. And that's important for the parties to trust the process. And when we went back and told them what